Hey guys, Claire Cantro here with Spread the Well, and I know it's been a minute since I have done any of these little educational videos, but we're gonna kick back off and start kind of putting together some content that I think will be helpful to like some very specific entities. So what I'm focusing on in, I guess this is February and kind of the rest of February, is taking maybe one muscle or one myofascial element or one type of presentation that I see a lot and giving you some global information about that and maybe some specifics on how to release that. So today I am talking about the scalene muscles. So the scalenes are a group of 3 muscles, anterior, middle, posterior, and they are deep in the sort of anterolateral neck, okay? So the side of the neck and more of the front of the neck. This muscle is one of those muscles that if you have ever felt like, am I having a heart attack? Or I'm having an anxiety attack, or I must be having some cervical disc with a nerve root because I've got this pain down my arm or anything like that, you may have experienced kind of a scalene syndrome or trigger points, myofascial restrictions, spasms in your scalene muscles. So what these muscles are, and I'll show you a little picture of them to start. Okay, so this is a very, very deep visualization of the deepest aspects of your cervical spine, okay? So I'm gonna show you this, and these right here on the side are your scalene muscles, okay? So that one right there I think is cut, and you'll see the deeper ones. Anterior, posterior, I think that probably says scalenes, yes. So what I want you to see here is 2 things. One is that the attachment to the cervical spine is on the lateral transverse process, okay? So it's not the front of the neck, it's not the back of the neck, it's the side of the neck, and that will be important when we talk about what these muscles do. The other thing that's important to note is that its distal attachment is to the first and second rib. So I think on this one, yep, you see that guy goes to the second rib. These 2 guys go to the first rib, okay? So that's like the picture of the deepest aspects of the cervical spine. To give a better indication of what that looks like, this is a snapshot of like an anterolateral musculature of someone's neck or cervical spine. So those right there, deep in there, are the scalenes, but I want you to look at all of these very big dominant muscles that are sitting on top of that. So this right here is the sternocleidomastoid, which will be its own video. Right here is the upper trapezius, and right there is the levator. So those 3 muscles, which are often probably the most problematic in anything that's, we're talking about neck pain or neck tension, headaches, those sort of things, those 3 muscles are key. The problem is that those muscles also just sit right on top of where those scalenes are, and 9 times out of 10, they play off of each other, right? Where you may have, tension or trigger points in one of those groups of muscles, and they're going to contribute to satellite trigger points or tension that generates in the other muscles, okay? The other thing that is kind of good to know about the sternocleidomastoid, the upper trap, and levator is that we can release or do some manipulation to those muscles and be able to kind of access the scalenes at the same time. So I did a video one time of talking about how to do a trigger point release to your upper trap and levator, where you bend over in a doorway and you get that tennis ball right there. That is often what I will give to patients who are experiencing some scalene and have them kind of rotate a certain way that gets a little bit more of the anterior surface. But if you put enough pressure through upper trap, levator, then you're gonna press into some of those scalene muscles as well. So that's a way to do it. The other thing is that when I'm teaching some self-releases to the scalenes, a lot of times I'm like, okay, well, it's way easier to find your SCM, okay? So that's the SCM right there. It pops out when I side bend and rotate, side bend one direction, rotate opposite. And then underneath there is where kind of the anterior scalene is. So that's a way that I can kind of isolate. So that's why I like to show you those pictures as well. Here's another, if we clear everything out, here are the scalene muscles with nothing else there, but you can see attachment to the first rib, the second rib, and the lateral aspects of the cervical spine. This is a picture, this is an anomaly, which means is like in some people have what we call a cervical rib, which is not just first and second rib, but on top of that, coming off of, I think, C7, you get kind of a little rib-like projection. Not everybody has that. Oftentimes, the people who do have that will have a little bit more trouble with scalene tension, brachial plexus, stuff going down the arms, jamming in this thoracic outlet, that sort of thing. So, but we'll table that for another time. Here are the most important things to understand about the scalene muscles. Its primary function, so every muscle has sort of a primary function and maybe some secondary, tertiary functions, but its primary function is cervical side bending or cervical lateral flexion. Okay, so when it activates, and remember it attaches to the side of the lumbar spine, when it activates, it's going to pull our neck into, or our head and neck into lateral flexion, okay? A secondary component of what it can do, because it attaches to the first and second rib, is it is considered an accessory breathing muscle. So any muscle that attaches to ribs, in addition to its primary function, is an accessory breathing muscle, okay? There are some muscles that only attach to ribs, so that would be like the intercostal muscles, one of the posterior serratus muscles that go rib to rib. Those muscles are primary breathing and respiration muscles. But any muscle that has one attachment to ribs functions as an accessory breathing muscle, which means that when we have increased ventilation, so we're doing some endurance exercise, or we're stressed, or we're not using our diaphragm properly, or any of those things, we start recruiting the accessory breathing muscles to pull up and out on the rib cage to where we can get a bigger, deeper breath, okay? So a lot of times what we see in chronic stress, chronic pain, is this dysfunctional breathing pattern where instead of using our diaphragm, our intercostals, we're recruiting these accessory breathing muscles, including the sternocleidomastoid, the scalenes, the pec muscles, the QL, lots of things that have attachments into the ribs. We're using those to do what the primary breathing muscles should be doing. The problem with that is that these muscles, when they are overused improperly, wreak havoc, okay? They cause all kinds of pain symptoms. Oftentimes as a pain practitioner and someone who is addressing pain complaints that sometimes don't seem to make sense on paper, objective findings, imaging or whatnot doesn't show, these are the muscles that I'm going to first, okay? So here's another little picture just of the like respiratory muscles, okay? And you can see here, all right, that this is the sternocleidomastoid, and then the scalenes here all attach either to the sternum or the first and second rib, and they are accessory breathing muscles, okay? So that's just kind of another picture. Here's what I want to show you. The scalene muscles, when they have myofascial trigger points or aberrant tension, or they are doing too much, they are exhausted, they are overworked, there are some very classic symptoms, signs and symptoms that we see, okay? Here, so my trusty trigger point book. All right, so this is a picture. Again, remember that in this book or pictures like this, when you're looking at trigger point referred pain pattern pictures, that's quite an alliteration. It shows you anatomically where those muscles are. Okay, so we see first and second rib, lateral neck. Then it shows you where it might refer pain. Okay, so the scalenes refer to the chest, anterior chest. This, people will talk about this like pain almost under their clavicle or right in their ribs. Also the back of the shoulder, the scapula. You could go and try to work on those rhomboids all day and not get anywhere, okay? And down the back of the arm, the front of the arm, and down to the thumb, okay? So, let me make sure there's no other pictures there. I would even say that in, so here's just another little schematic picture of the scalene. So that's the sternocleidomastoid that's whited out. Those are the scalenes there, okay? I would say even if you saw this full arm, this full arm down here, you would see some of that same residual, some of that same referred pain down the arm. Now, the other interesting thing is, as we have talked about in the past, is that trigger points can refer pain, but they can also refer other types of symptoms. So you may get numbness, tingling type of sensation, or paresthesias, or different things. The other interesting thing about the scalene muscle, so I've just showed you its referred pain pattern. That looks eerily similar to some of our cervical nerve root pain patterns, okay? So we've got to get out of this constant, if we feel something down our arm, it indicates that there's a nerve root being entrapped, and that's likely a disc problem. I don't want to say generally, or that's never the case. That is sometimes the case. But more often than not, if we do some differential diagnosis and we can rule out a peripheral neuropathy, meaning some nerve that's being entrapped in the arm component, and we look at this zone right here, we call this zone the thoracic outlet, okay? This is the area where all of the nerves come off, or the nerve roots come off of the neck, the cervical spine, and then they join together, something we call the brachial plexus, which is a network of nerves that then kind of form different things and become the nerves that go down the arm. So not only can we have an entrapment up here where the disc bulges in the nerve root, or tabling the disc discussion altogether, we can have cervical degenerative changes, which create either bone spurs, or it takes the little foramen where the nerve root passes through, and it creates just some stenosis and inflammation and all of that. We can also have a nerve that's entrapped in the arm, but there is this zone that has several areas that are really problematic. It's a high traffic area. It's a very congested area. And when it gets even more congested, because say we are over recruiting our scalenes to do breathing when we should be breathing with our diaphragm, or anything else, that is an area where we can get in neural tension, neural encroachment, or the nerves, the brachial plexus, gets sort of pinned down under some of these muscles. Another spot where that can occur is under the pec. So we have a big pec muscle, we have a little pec muscle. Under that pec minor is also where those brachial plexus that then becomes the nerves to the arm get entrapped, okay? So it's never as simple as I either have a carpal tunnel or I have a nerve root, disc nerve root problem. There's a much bigger picture, and I would say way more of the time that I am treating someone with any symptoms down their arms, it has to do with what's happening right here, okay? So I'm gonna pause, and I'm trying to think, the other interesting thing about that, the scalene refers this pain and this distribution, sometimes even paresthesia down the arm, is that when we are also compressing the nerve, so say the scalenes get super tight, they pull up on the first and second rib, and the brachial plexus is trying to pass under there, and we get some compression on that brachial plexus, we call that thoracic outlet syndrome. There's other places that the brachial plexus can get entrapped, but one spot is underneath the scalenes, or in between the scalenes and the first and second ribs, okay? So those, when that happens, some of the symptoms that we feel are numbness and tingling or paresthesias down the arm, pain and achiness down the arm. a heavy feeling. I call that like the blood pressure cuff sensation, where you're like, I just don't feel like I'm getting flow down there. That's because in addition to the brachial plexus passing through there, you've got all the vessels, the nerves, the veins and arteries that are going to and from the arm that are passing through the thoracic outlet. So there's a lot of symptomology that can mimic each other, that oftentimes just by freeing up a little bit of the thoracic outlet, going to the scalenes, going to the pec minor, we can create some better flow and space there, and we can eliminate a lot of those symptoms.